Well, folks, the 2026 midterms pose a significant risk for the Republicans in control and maintaining the very, very slim majority they currently have in the House of Representatives. And we know historical trends show us that they could be in for a reckoning in 2026 in the House elections. Democrats need to net roughly 6 or 7 seats in order to take control of the House of Representatives, and there is plenty of opportunities for Democrats to flip competitive seats in 2026. So today we are going to be talking about how the Republicans could lose the 2026 House election. We'll also be doing a video later today on how Republicans can win the 2026 House elections. Now, like we said, historical trends are on the Democrat side. We know in 18 of the last 20 midterms, the party in power has seen a loss of seats in the House of Representatives in their midterm. There's only 2 years when that didn't happen. 1998 and 2002. 98 for the economic prosperity that we saw and really a backlash to the Republican impeachment of President Bill Clinton. And then 2002 was the aftermath of 9/11. And there was a lot of unity in the Republican Party and around the country around after 9/11. So you look, 2018, Trump lost 40 or 41 seats in the House of Representatives. He lost 40 or 41 seats in the House of Representatives in 2018. We know during Barack Obama's first midterm, 2010, he lost 61 or the two, 61 or 63 seats in the House of Representatives. And President Trump, his approval rating has been declining recently, especially among independents. Remember, the independents, these are people, are not MAGA supporters. They are people who dislike Biden and Harris after 4 years of their leadership and decided they wanted to try something different, and that's why they went for Donald Trump. That's why they voted for him, because he said he would lower cost. He would lower inflation. He would make the economy better for the everyday American. And like we said, they are not these loyal supporters of President Trump. They're just not. You still have to court to these people, especially in elections that are lower turnout elections. You have to be able to court to those types of people. The low propensity voters that you saw in 2024 are not going to turn out in the same margins that they did in 24 in 26. It's just not going to happen. You have to court to the voters. Either you have to court to the voters that are going to actually vote, or you have to get the people who are low propensity voters to actually vote in 2026. Now, you have to make a distinction. There is a big difference between the House race that we have coming up and the Senate race. The Senate race, basically, the Democrats have no chance at flipping this. Even when you put all the safe seats and lean seats in play here, basically the Republicans are still going to have a 51 seat majority is their floor. Like the Democrats' ceiling is like 49 seats in the Senate. So not really looking at the Senate. Today we are looking at the House of Representatives. And overall, most seats in the House are either deemed to be safe GOP seats or safe Democrat seats. Now, with roughly about 205 seats for each party has been deemed safe, likely, or lean. Now, every organization that does polling on this stuff and they make predictions has a different number on certain races, but you're roughly going to see about 200-ish seats that each party will hold, which most likely means that whoever wins in the 2026 House races will not hit a majority of more than 230 seats. We have not seen a party have a majority of more than 230 seats since 2018, I don't believe. Yeah, 235. And it wasn't even like this huge majority before that. 241 for the GOP before. The last time was in the 2018 midterms, during President Trump's first midterms, that we saw that Democrats were able to, that was the last time a party had more than 230 seats in the House. 2020, 222, 222, 220. So obviously, you can see that right here. It's not going to be a huge majority either way you go. But now let's look, how can the Republicans, or how could they lose in the 2026 House elections? And I don't say this because I want them to lose. I say this because you need to recognize reality. We have to look at reality. What are the vulnerabilities? What are the liabilities for the Republican Party going into 2026? Some of the more controversial policies could fuel the Democrat narrative and energize their base to get out and vote in 2026. Remember, President Trump was elected for his pocketbook issues, to, increase the actual wages for American workers, to bring down inflation, to bring down the cost of goods. That's what he was elected to do. He will win or lose on that, on those economic issues. And the economic instability that we are seeing right now is not what the administration needs right now. And in swing districts, it could flip back to the Democrats if independents pull back from the Trump administration. That is what we are seeing. We know Donald Trump was elected on economic factors to bring down costs, to bring down inflation, to make life more affordable for the everyday American, to make life more affordable for the young generation, the people who are under 40 years old, who life, it could be a struggle for them, who they just want to own a home and raise a family and have at least the same type of life that their parents had. And when you are seeing what Trump has done, and although I agree at the end of the day with reciprocal tariffs, I agree that we need to tariff China. I agree we need to decouple with China. But when you have economic instability, when you are slapping 90% tariffs on countries that for the most part have been friendly with us, why are we beating the hell out of certain countries? Why are we beating Vietnam as hard as we're beating China? Why are we beating Canada as hard as we're beating Mexico? It just makes no sense. And you saw what happened. The stock market dropped. The stock market dropped. In the unfortunate part about that is the stock market may have dropped, but we did not see a correlated rise in the price of a bond. Which, what does that mean? It means that Americans are taking their money out of the stock market and they're not putting it into bonds. They're either holding it in cash or they're putting it outside of America. Look at this. You saw what happened. Trump announced the reciprocal tariffs went into place. The S&P 500 dropped roughly, 800 points here. And then it rebounded when Trump announced that there was going to be a pause. And we're kind of sitting right around here. And that's okay. That's okay. Over the last year, the market is still up. And you know what? Markets drop. It's just part of it. But it didn't drop. It didn't need to drop like that. That did not need to happen. This was self-induced. And this could hurt President Trump and the Republicans in swing districts. There is no doubt about it that it could help or hurt the Republicans in swing districts. All Trump had to do was call up these other countries and say, we're renegotiating a deal or we're going to put tariffs on you. You didn't actually have to put tariffs on them. I don't see what the upside was. What did you get out of that? And the American people feel the same way. But tariffs, at the end of the day, tariffs will raise prices across the board. And we know it will hurt American middle class the most, the working class the most. And now tariffs, look, here's the reality. Trump's goal should be to lower tariffs on our products, on our products from other countries, their products to our country, lower non-tariff barriers so our products have new markets to get into so we can compete in new markets. That is great. That is wonderful. I love it. I support all of that. What I don't support is putting a 90% tariff on Vietnam or putting a ginormous tariff on South Korea when virtually we have free trade agreements with these countries. Because ultimately, if you wanted to reduce the non-tariff barriers, you need to call them up and you can negotiate. You could have got the same outcome without the instability in the market. Because at the end of the day, 65% of Americans rely on the stock market. They do for their retirement. You talk about pensions. Okay, what do pensions own in order to pay out retirement benefits? They own assets. They own stocks. They own bonds. They own mutual funds. They own, ETFs. This is how a lot of the world relies on this. This is what they rely on. And you cannot mess with it for no reason. Look, the stock market corrects, and that's totally fine when the stock market corrects. But when it corrects for something that could have been avoided, that's when you have an issue. And we know that Americans who make less than $50,000 a year are going to be hit the hardest by tariffs. They have less disposable income, if any disposable income they have to begin with, to absorb the additional costs that they're going to have to pay for their goods. And someone who makes over $100,000 a year will still be affected by it, but they have much more capital to absorb the additional costs that come along with these tariffs. And Americans with less income cannot afford to absorb it as well. And if tariffs stay on longer than expected, the administration and the administration is not able to make deals with other countries fast enough, or they alienate other countries, it could hurt the ability of the U.S. to move away from China in the short term, because that is ultimately the goal of the tariffs. We need to decouple with China. We need to decouple our economy with China. We need to decouple for national security reasons our economy with China. But in order to do that, we need to build strong alliances with the other countries in the world, so they are doing it in lockstep with us. And we've already seen it in Canada. We pissed off the Canadians so much that Mark Carney, who most likely will win this election here coming up soon in Canada for the Prime Minister, They're already willing to make deals with China. You saw Greenland coming out saying that they want to make deals with China. The EU wants to make deals with China. In order for this to work, the world needs to cut off China. We can't do it alone. We need to build alliances with these other countries. And I get it. If we're getting ripped off by a country because of their non-tariff barriers or their tariffs in general, we need to go after that. But ultimately, the creme de la creme, the big goal is China. It's not Mexico. It's not Canada. It's not the EU. It's not Vietnam. It's not Madagascar. It's China. So that is definitely something that could hurt the Republicans in the midterms. And then moving on to the Democrat turnout advantage. Midterms, like we said, typically have a higher correlation or concentration, I should say, of college-educated voters who tend to lean to the left. That's just the reality of the situation here. The voters who vote in midterm elections are higher propensity voters. They are high propensity voters. They are college educated. They make more money. That's the reality of the situation. They make more money. They are, and they turn out higher in these elections, but specifically midterm elections. And we know that the GOP does not have the greatest get out the vote efforts. And it's very minimal in comparison to the Democrats' infrastructure that the Democrats have spent decades building. And this leverages early vote-in, mail-in vote-in, and just getting a higher percentage of Democrats to the polls. And the Republicans they had a great thing when it came to mail-in vote-in, early vote-in in 2024. But a lot of that had to do with Trump. The reliance on Trump. They needed Trump to turn out these voters. When Trump's not on the ballot, can they turn out those same voters? I don't know. And look at this. You say the people with college degrees or higher, 60% view Donald Trump or his evaluation of his administration as poor or very poor. Okay, well, when these are the highest concentration of voters you're going to see in the next election, that is not what you need to see. That is not what you need to see. And look, there is some slippage among Republicans here. Look at this. Democrats, 98% of Democrats view Donald Trump and the evaluation of his administration as very poor. Only 89% view Trump as excellent or good. You have 7% of the Republican Party who's saying that it's poor or very poor. You have 57% of independents, and granted, this comes from Atlas Intel. They were the highest rated, the most accurate pollster in the 2024 and 2022 elections. So this isn't some liberal propaganda pollster. This is the most accurate pollster in 2024 and 2022. It's as simple as that. So if the Republicans aren't going to be able to revolutionize their get out the vote effort in the next 2 years, they need to focus on meeting voters where they're at, appealing to voters who are going to vote in this election, or they need to find out a way to get more of the low propensity voters to the polls, to get them to vote early by mail, all of that. That's what they have to do, because this could be a liability for the Democrats. And then the really big one that I think a lot of people underestimate has to do with poor candidate quality. Polling shows that Republicans prefer policy purity over electability. And that could hinder the ability of the GOP to retain some competitive races. We have a poll right here. This is from YouGov that came out March 30th through April 1st from The Economist and YouGov. It shows for 2028, Democrats prioritize electability. Now, 2028, my guess is they don't feel differently. The assumption you have to make here is they don't feel differently about top of the ticket versus like the Senate or the House. But look at this. Republicans prefer a candidate who emphasizes policy agreement versus electability. That could be a liability for the GOP going into the 2026 midterms. No doubt about that. No doubt about that. Republicans need strong candidates to defend the narrow majority they currently have. But loyal MAGA supporters believe all candidates should be extremely loyal to the policies of the party, which will 100% hurt them in competitive races. Because there are policies that are espoused by the Republican Party that are not popular, especially with independents, especially in these swing districts. And just because a candidate will win in a Trump plus 30 district does not mean that that same person with the same policies is going to win in a bellwether district that voted for Trump, Biden, Trump. It's just that it is a different candidate you need to field for a competitive race versus a race that is a safe Republican or a safe Democrat seat. You see that by and far. You're not going to, for the same reason the Democrats aren't going to try and get AOC to run for like congressional district for like 4 or 3 in the state of New York. Like, they're not going to get AOC to run in one of these districts. They're not going to have AOC run in New York 19. They wouldn't have some extreme leftists run in Maine's 2nd Congressional District, where Trump carried it by 10 points and Jared Golden won it by half a percentage point. Like, that's just not reality. Because you would lose if you did that. And why some Republicans believe that policy agreement should be I think we should have a policy agreement on a lot of the fundamentals. But maybe tactics in some policy differences, that's a good thing. It's healthy to have disagreement. But at the end of the day, you don't get the disagreements you have don't mean anything unless you have power. Unless you're an elected official. Okay, yeah, great. Blake Masters had great policy agreement with Donald Trump. But did that mean he won the governor's race back in, the Senate race back in 2022? He had great policy but what does that policy agreement have for him now? He's sitting at home twiddling his thumbs watching TV. Like, that policy agreement really doesn't do anything for you if you can't get elected. I would rather have someone who maybe I disagree with a little bit on some issues, but they have a great electability, popular in the state, especially if it's a competitive race. I'll take that any day of the week. Any day of the week. For the same reason you're not going to run a MAGA Republican in Maine for the Senate, because they're not going to win. That's a Democrat state. They're not going to win there. But Susan Collins, who's a moderate, who breaks with the party 10, 15% of the time, she does win there. Because she breaks strategically with the Republican Party on certain issues that are not popular in Maine. Running hardline Republicans in competitive races, or even running a primary challenger against vulnerable Republicans, could produce an unelectable candidate in the general election. And Republicans need to understand that reality. They need to understand it, or they will lose. And then third thing, how the Democrats could win the midterms, how Republicans could lose, is messaging. Democrats were initially caught very flat-footed for the first, you could say, 6 to 8 weeks under Trump's administration. No doubt about that. They were caught very flat-footed. But now they have really started to get some footed underneath them, attacking Trump. And although it's a lie, and they're lying about this, they're attacking him on cutting Social Security and Medicare. What can Republicans do to make sure that how can they counter this? Because they're not cutting Medicare, they're not cutting Social Security. Are they taking illegal aliens off Social Security? Yes, but that's not cutting Medicare. Has one person in America, due to Trump's policies, received a reduction in their Medicare payment? Or their Social Security payment? No. But they've also been able to attack Trump on how he rolled out his tariffs. And inflation that will come from Trump's policies could cripple the economy. That's the messaging they're going after. They're attacking Trump on those issues. Look at this right here. Trump was elected on the economy. And look at this. He's 14 points underwater on the economy with the most accurate pollster from 2024. Now, look, I'm not going to take any poll too seriously, but it's a trend. You can see it in poll after poll that Trump is slipping. Maybe it's not 14 points underwater, but he's definitely slipping when it comes to the economy. Maybe he's 4 or 5 points in reality under. But either way, it's slipping. And I've talked with people who voted for Trump, who it's starting to slip with them. They're like, I'm all about the tariffs, but the way he rolled out the tariffs, look at this. There was a great piece of data in here. And here's the thing. The Republican policies are popular. Look at this. Rolling back federal protections for gender transition procedures. Starting negotiations with Russia to end the war in Ukraine. Mass deportations. Removing clean energy subsidies. Raising tariffs against specific countries as a negotiating tactic. Reinstating Schedule F. Rolling back federal protections for gender transition procedures. Ending birthright citizenship, raising tariffs across the board to protect U.S. manufacturing. Like, there is serious support for his actual policies. So what is the disconnect between the policies and his actual approval? Well, it's what policies are being pushed to the forefront of his administration. That's the issue here. But this is something I found very, very interesting, was the data when it came to the tariffs. 51% said they are completely against tariffs, which I don't know if I buy into that. I kind of struggle with that. But look at this. 49% say tariffs should be temporary. Totally agree. 13% don't know. Still, you have a clear majority here. Clear majority of people. In your opinion, will new tariffs announced by the Trump administration impact inflation? It will increase inflation. Of course. That is how the world, these are basic laws of economics. This is economics 101. But this is the data that really caught me off guard, that I not caught me off guard, but really was surprised to see, and I'm actually happy to see. In your opinion, is the formula adopted by the Trump administration to determine the set tariffs on each country appropriate? 56% say no. Only a fourth of the country says yes completely. Only 11% say yes in part, kind of. And I find myself kind of in this kind of, but also kind of no. It's like maybe I do find myself in the no category. I agree with the tariffs. Do I agree with how he calculated the tariffs? No. Because basically the way he calculated it, the only way that you can reduce his so-called tariff that they have on us is by increasing the amount of imports that they take from the United States, which we should not be solely focusing on the trade deficit. I think we should focus on the trade deficit with some big countries, China, the EU, Canada, Mexico, the big countries, like those big countries, we should focus on the trade deficit, no doubt. But ultimately with Canada, we have a trade surplus with Canada except in oil, which we import a ton of oil at an insanely low rate. We refine it in the States and then we sell it for a huge profit. So like, does anybody really want to get rid of that? No. Like if there is a trade deficit with a big country, we should deal with it. Like I'm okay dealing with trade deficits, but just focus on trade deficits alone across the board with every country is a losing strategy. It is a losing strategy. And, and the Democrats are going to take this, and I get it. Why do they want to push so hard? Because the Democrats are going to lie. They're going to lie about it. And, of course, we know that Democrats are going to mobilize voters around abortion. At the end of the day, they will. And I guess one more thing when it comes to the tariffs. They're going to attack him on how he rolled out the tariffs and the inflation from his policies and how it's going to cripple the economy. Okay, here's the reality. The reality is that he did roll out the tariffs in a kind of crappy way. It was not this is not how I would have liked to see it rolled out. I didn't like the way it happened. So if someone who voted for Trump, who was very, very supportive of Trump, didn't like that, can you imagine? I know I'm not alone. I've talked with a lot of people who think it could have been rolled out differently. Because at the end of the day, he did not have this grand plan. There wasn't a plan. There wasn't. As someone who supports him, there wasn't a plan. But the Democrats, we know, will mobilize voters around abortion, just like they do every election. Just like in Minnesota in 2022. I'm from Minnesota, so I'm going to use that example. The Democrats mobilized voters on abortion. They lied to voters left and right, told them that the GOP nominee against Tim Walz in 2022, his name was Scott Jensen, would restrict abortion in Minnesota. And it was very effective. It may be effective, but it was also a lie. It was a complete lie. The reality is that abortion is protected by the Minnesota Constitution, and it would require a constitutional amendment through a ballot initiative or 2/3 of Congress in Minnesota, which has a 0% chance of happening. 0% chance. But did it stop the Democrats from running on it? Absolutely not. So to wrap things up here, folks, Republicans could lose the House in 2026 due to historical midterm trends, economic fallout from tariffs if Trump is not able to make a deal, Democrat turnout advantage, weak candidate recruitment, and effective Democrat message on these issues. That like the Democrats, the pendulum swings both ways. The pendulum has swung towards the Republicans heavily here, but let's not pretend like the pendulum is never going to swing back to the Democrats again. That is not reality. To people who say, "Oh, Democrats will never win an election again," watch them. If you go into an election with that attitude that they will never win an election again, watch them win an election. Not that I want them to, but if you go in cocky like that, thinking that, there's nothing that we can do that would make people vote for Democrats, watch it happen. Watch it. It has happened time and time again. Republicans must defend these vulnerable seats in New York, California, and Arizona to counter this Democrat narrative with strong economic messaging. Boost in get out the vote efforts, and the narrow margin means every swing state of 5 to 7 seats could hand control to the Democrats. 5 to 7 seats could hand control to the Democrats. You must be disciplined and adapt. Is critical for the GOP in the 2026 House elections. That's going to wrap things up for today, folks. Let me know your thoughts down below. Hit that subscribe button. Make sure you never miss another video from us again in the future, and we will catch you next time.